Hi everyone, thank you for joining. So today we are going to be talking about data security questionnaires and how much we love them. We've got two people on the call today. We've got Tom, who's head of delivery, and Alexa Gallet, who is the co-founder of HR Data Hub. Just a couple of housekeeping points. So first of all, the session's 45 minutes. We're going to have just a chat through some of the key topics of data security questionnaires with Tom and Alexa, and then we'll reserve some time at the end for questions from everyone that's on the call. If you've got any questions in the meantime, feel free to come off mute or drop it into the chat. And then second thing is this is recording. So don't share anything that you wouldn't want to share publicly, because this will be repurposed for social media purposes. And yeah, so the recording will be sent through to anyone who didn't attend as well. So please just take note of that. So other than that, we can kick off and maybe go for quick intros. So Alexa, would you like to give a quick intro?
Yeah. Hey, so I'm Alexa, and I hope that this meeting doesn't trigger all your house robots because it kind of is something that happens. But I'm co-founder of HR Data Hub, and I'm also in charge of COO, so I'm in charge of all of our operations stuff, and this setting up the program around security and privacy and all this stuff is something that I'm responsible for, and it's a biggie because we're a data-centric company. So a lot of stuff that we do is gather sensitive data from organizations and have them transfer that to us as aggregated and sort of displayed back to them in terms of aggregated insights. So the blood of our company is literally data and keeping it safe, and it's sensitive data. So I have a lot of opinions on this topic and a lot of hard, stressful moments because it's something that I have to do every day. It's not just I guess this is on the side of our business. We kind of have to comply. This is the core of what we do. So it sounds kind of boring, but it's actually quite interesting. And I'm kind of very happy to have been invited to share some of that because we struggled so much, and I kind of wish I had someone to speak to about this when we started because I know nothing. So that's it.
I wouldn't go that far. You definitely know more than nothing. At least now.
I do now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's called a facade. Co-founder facade.
And tell that you've done sales in the past. Nice. And Tom?
Yeah, cool. So I know a few people here, head of delivery, Trust Keith. So I look after what we do and how we do it once someone becomes a customer. I got experience on both sides of due diligence questionnaires actually, because I've not only responded to hundreds, but I've also sent out quite a few as well. So know what I'm looking for, and have been in roles where I'd be assessing responses to them as well. So I've been on both sides of the fence. Trust me, they're not any less painful when you're sending them out. To have to read through responses, if you think they're painful to fill in, try reading 20 of them and having to judge which one's the best. Not as fun. So yes, I've got a bit of insight on that as well. Hopefully can share on this call. Yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Tom. And just one question. You said you look after what we do and how we do it. What does that mean?
Oh, gosh, I've never had to expand on that.
Nice.
I look after our customers, so all the data protection advice and stuff that we deliver, so all the customers and all of the customer team, customer success, DPOs, all those people report into me, but also on our product, we're developing our product constantly, and hopefully some exciting stuff to share on that pretty soon. But yeah, that side of things as well. So both the kind of reactive stuff supporting customers and some of the proactive kind of developments that we're making on what we offer to them as well. So yeah, nice. a bit of everything.
Nice. All right, cheers, Tom. Thanks for explaining. So just to kick off, Alexa, thanks for joining. We got you on because you respond to a ton of data security questionnaires, and it would be great to get some of your insight into your experience doing that. But before talking about the topic specifically, it might be interesting just to get a bit of context on who HR Data Hub is, what does the business do, and where you're at from like a business maturity perspective would be cool to hear as well.
Cool. Yeah, we develop a HR intelligence platform. It's a fancy way of saying we sort of like want to treat HR like people treat marketing, where you have a dashboard about everything that's going on and you can compare yourself to how others are doing in the market. And so we help employers, and usually really, really big organizations. Our average size is 2,000 employees or more. So kind of like any big company you can think of are kind of like client or ideal client. And we help them get insights on how they compare to others and how they manage their people. So that means that we gather data about all these things for hundreds of companies. We get it all together and we give them charts that they can sort of like look at to understand if they're overpaying, underpaying people, if their pensions policy is kind of shit compared to their competitors or not, or if the diversity is not where they want to be, or what others are doing that's working, all this kind of stuff. So the way it works is that people submit data. It's a SaaS thing, so they subscribe to HR Data Hub. Part of it is that they submit their data to us at the start of every year, and then we take that data in super securely and privately, and we sort of like turn it into something that can become benchmarkable, and then we put it on our platform. So the precondition for organizations to work with us is that they have to share the data, and therefore the precondition to working with us is having to go through lots of checks to make sure that when they send this data, we handle it really well. And it's really complicated data. It's like sort of like red flag type data because it is about individual employees. So we have all this information. So it's very sensitive. It's information that people within the business don't even have access to, kind of sensitive. So we have to take it with the utmost care. And because we work with only giant companies, InfoSec is like, they have lots of people looking at that. They have really specific processes for that. So it's a part of our daily life. We're a 7-person startup. 2 months ago, it was 5 of us. A year and a half ago, it was 2 of us. So we've always had this caliber of clients. So I know what it's like to fill those in with 2 people, 5 people, 7 people, and no money, a little bit more money, just a tiny bit more money. And what you have to do to still get those clients over the line, because we don't go after any other type of clients. So we're in the process of getting a lot of funding now, which hopefully will help us scale all of that. And hopefully I won't have to be doing this myself in the future. But right now I do, which is why I can have a few tips on how to make that work without bankrupting your business, because they had to learn.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in terms of, so the type of data you mentioned, like you're getting benchmarking data, like are you underpaying and overpaying? So in terms of the data you're getting about employees, is it things like salary information? Is there diversity data, stuff like that? Like
So there's 2 types. In terms of employee specific data, we got everything pertaining to one's role. So what their job title is, what team do they sit in, what pension contributions do they have, what kind of total bonus packages they get, do they have a car allowance, like literally every single thing about that pertains to their employment. And then however many things the employer has about their identity. So we sort of like specifically look at 5 things: what their age is, what their gender is, what their ethnicity is, disability status, LGBTQ status. I think that's it. So so quite a few things. Kind of like as much as you can know about a person, and sensitive enough that we don't have their names, but if that came out and you had lots of time and energy and you wanted to go on LinkedIn and try to figure out who's roughly 35, is a marketing manager, and is also sort of like Black, you could figure this out. So it's very, very important to be just really on top of this in terms of how we manage it.
So if we rewind a couple of years and it's just you and the other co-founder and you've got your first product, you're taking it to market with enterprise customers, I'm assuming they still were very heavy on data protection then. So how did you deal with questionnaires in the earlier days?
Honestly, you'd be surprised by in the early days, how many people were just not putting us through questionnaires. Like we got probably our first 50 customers without having to go through a single questionnaire. And it's ridiculous, but sometimes it happens. That doesn't make me feel great because it means that, first of all, we didn't give them the assurance. It kind of like is under the radar, and that's never good for them. It kind of like then becomes suspicious when 1 year later we did their renewals. They were like, oh, you didn't do this. Why do you have this? It's actually better for us that we say, hey, we need to do the questionnaire. It actually strengthens our relationship if we are the ones saying, you should really send us a questionnaire about this. But in the early days, we were trying to hack stuff together. So a lot of these questionnaires ask you about your policies on things. And we're like, let's go find a policy template, that will now become our policy. But it's, so everything is patchy and it didn't necessarily sort of like correlate up. And so what ended up happening is that a lot of times we accepted a lot of client terms on what our policy should be. And so that's really problematic and unscalable because everybody will have their own policy and you can't just accept everybody because you have only one platform. So sometimes it happened that we said to organizations, look, we can't do this. We just don't have the resources to do it. We had to turn around business, but most of the time we would just kind of like adopt a policy from a template that wasn't really appropriate, or until we kind of looked at it again, or we just accepted whatever was mandated by our customers. And it was obviously not sort of sustainable, which is why we had to change things quite dramatically pretty quickly after this. Because when you start agreeing to things, you're like, oh my God, this is putting my business at risk.
Yeah, so, I can imagine. And Tom, you've obviously sat on the other side of data protection questionnaires. When you hear Alexa say that you've got away with the first 50 customers without doing one, is that something you've seen commonly? And like, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely plausible. Yeah, I think it does happen. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I think maybe not from that side. I mean, if there's a decision not to do it on that side, so be it. But I think I agree with Alexa in terms of like, it's slightly concerning that these businesses are not doing that. And also I do think it can come back to bite you, because I've definitely joined organizations where I've gone, are we not doing any checks? No, okay, we should start doing checks. And then when we start doing checks, find that there are suppliers that we're working with that don't meet the standards, and we have to drop. And actually we were working with another business through Trust Keith where that happened as part of they were going for ISO 27001. As they started going through their supply chain, they were going, well, actually these guys are not up to scratch, we're going to have to drop them. So that I think that's the risk that comes with it. You can lull you into a full sense of security to a degree, like Alexa says.
Where was that, Alexa, where was like the inflection point whereby you had to actually start thinking about it proactively yourself? Like what was the tipping point for you?
I think when we started dealing with a few organizations that were really well set up, then we're like, oh, we're getting lots of questions, and we feel really uncomfortable at this point to just say yes to everything or just accept whatever terms or whatever policies. Like, it becomes too much of a mess. And if I can't keep track of what we agree to do or say we're going to do, we're handling people's data here, we can't do that. So when we started getting to the point where we had maybe like a couple more people on board, where I could delegate some stuff to other people and then have more time. But that, again, it's not by the time we're 15 people, it was the difference between 2 and 3 employees, or 3 or 4. That's when we were like, okay, our next move is doing a full audit. Our next move is really getting things sorted out, because we'll be able to earn business much faster. And that's exactly what happened. So doing things, it feels like it's late because of our journey. We already had like 40 or 50 organizations, but it's in terms of the size of your company and amount of money that you have to do things, it doesn't need to be that late. So it was a bit late for my liking, but that's also not that bad. So I mean, some people don't even do it with our size company. So
yeah, it makes sense. And what would you say then, if you were to distill it down to like the top 2 or 3 points? What were the top 2 or 3 biggest problems or challenges you faced when you started to address it a bit more proactively? That is, address data protection more proactively.
Number 1 was, I don't know where to start. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have money to have really fancy consultants to do all of this. And I also don't think that sometimes of these, the minute you start talking to people about it, they're like, yeah, ISO 27001. What is your, 15 kind of like level folder policies? And I'm like, it's 7 of us, so a lot of this is not appropriate. Like, no, we won't have bi-weekly committees on this thing. I'm not, I don't have it. So it's more like, how do I adapt this so that I adapt it to my company? And answering all these questions together is really complicated. So those are the main points where you're like, this is going to be hard. But turns out it actually wasn't that bad. But those were the big questions at the start.
Nice. Tom, what do you think on that? We hear a lot of companies saying we think we need ISO straight away. Like, if you're a tech scale up, you're going enterprise, what basics do companies need to have in place, and what maybe do they not need to have in place?
Yeah, I take issue with the word need. No one needs ISO 27001. Does ISO 27001 speed you through the process? Yeah, probably. Or in a lot of cases, yes, is the answer. There are some organizations where you can say we're ISO 27001 certified and they drop the due diligence questionnaire on security because they go, great, we can verify that. And then there are other organizations that don't care and they make you fill it in anyway. So there's no guarantee, but it definitely can. It definitely can help. But in terms of I think organizations have to ask if it's proportionate for them to go for ISO 27001 quite early. It's doable, it's possible, and actually there's an argument like the earlier you build it in, the better. But at the same time, it takes resource. It's not easy. It's an internationally recognized security standard. Currently, there's 114 different controls across 14 different control sets. This is a big deal. So you've got to be willing to put in the time and effort and get it right. Also, it's audited every year, so you have to be demonstrating that you're improving it. And so, yeah, it's a good idea if you can do it. Definitely recommended. But if you feel that that's too much, then it's probably not the right time for you. In which case, you're kind of looking at how do we get the best defensible position in the meantime. And generally speaking, that can be a few basics, because fundamentally, caveat, there will be people who send due diligence questionnaires out that are box ticking, that either won't read your responses or won't accept your responses unless they say everything that you want them to say. There are those two extremes to it, and we can't help those. There is a middle ground, though, which is where someone's doing a due diligence survey properly. What they're trying to understand about your business is, can I trust you? And so fundamentally, they're saying, does this organization have their shit together? And sometimes being able to demonstrate that you're doing the right things or thinking about the right things or have the right plans in place is enough. And so even like an easy practical example we've got through due diligence questionnaires by saying this customer is planning to get ISO 27001 within 2 years or something. Like, showing the right intentions or demonstrating the right starting point is a good place. You do need the basics. You do need some fundamental basics. I mean, you need to be able to demonstrate that you can comply with the law, for example. So records of processing activities. If you need to do DPIAs, you need to be able to demonstrate those sorts of things. Privacy notice needs to be there, at least be up to scratch. There are a few things that are kind of those fundamentals that you can't really argue, oh, we're too small to comply with the law. It's like, no, you're not. No one is. It's like saying, oh, too small to afford an accountant and pay my taxes. Well, if only that argument worked, I think we'd all be a little bit richer. So unfortunately, it doesn't apply. So having those basics in place, looking at what the law says, looking like you've got the right intentions, can often be enough, provided you're answering questions where they are doing it properly, where they're trying to get a sense of what you're like as an organization and whether they can trust you. Because remember, fundamentally, what they're doing is assessing their risk of working with you. So if you can demonstrate that you're low risk, then you're in a good position.
But I think, like, just to that point, for us, and I don't know if it's because we're a data-centric business or whatever, but we never operate from a point where we want to demonstrate that we want to do it so that we can demonstrate. But I think if you start with like, it needs to look like this, and you don't handle what actually is happening, and you can't, then that's where things starts to unravel. If you build a facade, but actually behind it, you have no understanding of how to keep things safe. You can't explain why you made that decision or not. You don't really have a feel for what the flags are going to be if you roll out this new analytics software that actually records the sessions of all your users by name and location, and you have their IP addresses and all that. If it's by the facade, if you do things so that you can complete these questionnaires, it's not really going to work out. Because in my experience, and I do, as I said in the blurb for this event, like I do on average like 4 months. At the moment, I have 8 going this month, so it's intense. And I can tell you that like literally 7 out of 8, it gets to a point where you complete the questionnaire, whatever, and then they're like, cool, we need to talk now because we've read your questionnaire and we want to ask you all the questions. And most of the time they go back and they ask you basically the principles of everything that you've sort of answered. So if you don't handle your stuff well and you're just like, yo, well, that's our official answer, and you can't actually back it up or have just really a good handle on it, and it's just a facade, it's not going to work out. And also you don't want to run your business this way in general, I'm sure. So that's the thing that has made things really good for us, is that I can say, we are working towards like, half the questions like, we are working towards this. We have aligned, we do not have this, but we have aligned our standards to this. They ask for a call and they're like, okay, tell me now, what are you aligning? How are you doing it? Who's doing that? Like, what happens when that happens, So you need to have a handle on it. And I feel like
it's very easy to tell very quickly on the other side whether the person understands what you're looking for. So one of the things that you're looking when you get the responses back in writing is are they the right responses to the right questions, and it can become very obvious very quickly when someone's got stock responses or just things that we might want to dig into a little bit more, because sometimes you got the wrong answer to the wrong question, or it just feels very generic. It doesn't feel like that's not really what we're looking for, and that's when you're going to press on that, and then it's going to be kind of prove it, justify it. What does this mean? What does that mean for you as a business? How do you approach this sort of thing? So I completely agree. It's not good enough to answer the questions correctly. You have to be doing what you're answering, and it's way better. I would argue it's way better to answer honestly and be able to justify it than to lie and not be able to justify it. If you lie and don't justify it, not only is that a red flag from a security perspective, it's a red flag in general. So I'm going to be passing that on to other people, saying, well, they lied to me during this process, they probably lied to you as well. So that's a major red flag, I would say. So just be careful about doing that. I completely agree.
Tom, if you look at like the crux of the issue with data security questionnaires in the startup and scale up arena, like the main issue is often you've got like a COO type figure responding to them who isn't a subject matter expert in the topic themselves. So Alexa,
literally not an
how
expert.
do you cope with that? Because that is fundamentally what makes it so difficult.
I'm going to say actually I think the main issue is the inflexibility of these larger organizations to recognize some of the partners that they're looking to work with. Personally, I think it's ridiculous to send a 7-person company 200 questions on information security. Like I just think it's stupid, because it's like, what do you expect some 200 questions? We've done it, we've worked with companies where we've gone through, I think as Virgin wanted answers to 187 security questions, and the company working with 10 people, and you're just like, this is just ridiculous. And the intransigence that they share. So I think the fundamental problem, to address the elephant in the room, the fundamental problem with due diligence questionnaires are the questionnaires themselves and the lack of proportionality in them that I think makes life really difficult for startup holders and almost kind of startup founders and people who are working in founders and people working in startups. Can we solve that? No. So what's the best thing that we can do to resolve that? But I do think it's definitely something that people in my industry in data protection do know and are aware of. And sometimes when we're sending this out, we know how ridiculous they are. So always remember there's a human on the other side of it as well.
The number of apologies that I get, and really sorry about this, but you have to do this. Like, they know that it sucks, but at the same time, what are they gonna do? Non-random checks? Like, I would rather they send me 190 questions, and I get really, really good at knowing exactly how to convey trust through those. And it challenges me as well, as like, I actually think that it's actually quite good if a CEO person is doing that, at least to start, because it really challenges your knowledge of what's going on in your own business and what are standards. So for example, one of the things that came out is like, oh, what's your business continuity plan? And I'm like, well, okay, well, what's your disaster recovery plan? And I'm like, okay. So it helps me understand what people think is a risk and what I think is a risk. Sometimes it's not the same thing. And actually, then you can train people properly, you can delegate, you can put things in place. So I would say I'd be more worried if you handed that responsibility off to someone else, because then when you get in front of investors, when you get in front of whoever, you have the accountability for things to be done. And if you don't understand them, it sucks. And it's also not that hard because people always ask you the same questions. One of the things that we did is like, we have an internal sort of like a repository of commonly asked questions around this that are always from the questionnaires or just in general. Yeah. And we make it searchable so that anybody in our business can say, what are encryption levels when it comes to this type of data? And yeah, sometimes we copy paste that into things, but we've crafted those answers so that it looks like a normal human being wrote them. So it's like, we do this because we're a 7-people company with this level of revenue. We don't have the capacity, but we're doing these things. And so that kind of like humanizes the process because that's the business that we want to get. And with these kind of companies, I would say though that it sucks to have to do the questionnaires, but then when you're in, they're never going to ask you to do this again, or not within a 2 or 3 years period. So you actually then have like the full trust, and we've grown significantly because of that. So I would say just really take accountability and make sure you make it work for you. It's always the same type of knowledge, so make sure you keep it somewhere so that you can learn from it. And for us, I mean, not to be like salesy, but like find really good partners. You don't know this stuff, like you're not supposed to, but you have providers that do. So make sure that you find the people that are appropriate for us. It's been Trust Keith on the privacy side, but we have legal, security. We have other partners that make sure that we can have answers that I understand to situations about, why do we put this in our agreement? What's this? Why is this? Like you need to have a good handle on these things.
So you actually opted against like actually trying to purely outsource the completion of questionnaires and took it on yourself to raise your own awareness of what's going on, basically.
Yeah, completely against that. If you outsource at this stage, especially if you can start to really outsource this to someone else, and you're still accountable for whatever they're saying, you have no understanding of what people are saying, whatever. I think you're shooting yourself in the foot. On these kinds of compliance things, you need to know. Just as when you have terms of service, you need to know what you said people can sue you for. Yeah. Same. So, yeah.
Nice. Tom, any thoughts on that?
I completely agree. I always make the argument. I think there's a very strong argument to say that you can't mature your kind of data protection side of the business without just maturing as a business. This is all about just kind of growing up a little bit as a business as well, because some of these things are things that you will be expected to do as a larger business, but they will touch upon things that perhaps you've not looked at before. Like Alexa says, like business continuity. It's a very information security, data protection kind of phrase and stuff like that. But what happens if your business goes down? What do you do? Like, this is just about growing up as a business as well. It's not just about answering questionnaires or complying with the law or things like that. These are things that are going to actually improve the day-to-day of the business anyway. Understanding what your processes are. I mean, why would you not want to do that? Like, understanding where your data is, how you get it, where it goes, what happens with it. Like, why would you not want to do that? There's an element of like, this is stuff that is a case of just maturing and growing up, and it will impact on areas outside of data protection as well. That are going to help you. An example of this might be, we're working with a company around supply due diligence of them doing it to their partners. So making sure they were asking questionnaires, and then they were going, oh, maybe we should have like a finance component to this, because how do we track control of our spend and stuff? And they added they're slowly building a bit of a procurement process, so they make sure they get the right approval for security, but also how much does this cost? Is this the right thing to spend on and stuff like that? So all of these things, they might seem in isolation quite small or quite narrow, but actually will touch on pretty much everything you do as a business. If you work with data, personal data, you can guarantee that everything to do with data protection touches every single part of your business. There is no part of your business that gets away with this. So you will be touching every part, you will be improving every part, you will be ensuring every part. So I think, yeah, it's a fair point that understanding your responses to these is a great way to understand where you are as a business in general, and kind of what your next steps are.
Nice. And then one of the questions I get asked all of the time is once you've got like an initial foundation of like the legal minimums in place, companies then start to ask about things like certifications. ISO is one that comes up. What's the cost of doing ISO versus the benefit of it, particularly like the cost?
Emotionally or financially?
Say that again.
Emotionally or financially?
Emotionally and financially.
Yeah, it's resource-wise, it's a big deal. It's very, not to repeat what I just said, but particularly ISO, any kind of ISO, but 27001 is specifically about information security. Everyone in your business is going to be touched by it in some degree, no matter what size your business is. You know, we're doing ISO for companies that are 30 people, companies that are over 300 people. No one gets away with it. It doesn't matter on your size. You know, you're going to be impacted by it to some degree. So you have to make sure you've got the, like I say, the resource to do that. There's two costs, I would say. There's internal time spent on it, and there's any external support you might get with that. Factor in both. Don't just look at the external costs. Internal costs are going to cost you as well. You're going to have people spending lots of days on this. The last audit we did with an external auditor took 8.5 days to complete at roughly £1,000 per day. So you can do the math there for the cost of the audit and the auditor. But that's 8.5 days that company was on an audit. So that's not just the cost of the auditor, that's the cost of that for the business. So there's multiple costs to factor in, I would say. Depend on the size of the business as well, because the larger you are, the bigger your audits get. So the bigger costs they become. The longer they get, the bigger internal costs they become, the bigger external costs they come. Yeah, and benefits. I mean, like I say, you can sail through due diligence quite a lot of the time. You know, there are quite a lot of due diligence surveys that will stop when you say you've got ISO 27001, because they'll go, okay, fine, that's good enough. It's a verified standard. You've been verified by people that are better than verifying this than I can do from a due diligence survey. So great, I can trust you. So it definitely unlocks a lot of those sorts of things. There are some companies that will not work with you unless you have ISO 27001, full stop. So it unlocks those customers. And also, coming back to my previous point around just maturing the business, ISO 27001 is fantastic at doing that. You know, this is you're really entering the kind of grown-up phase with ISO 27001 because it forces you to do a lot of things that are really sensible, but the things that not going to be ordinarily considered in your day-to-day, that are going to add a lot of value to just how your business works and how it thinks about things as well. Final point on this one, I would say just set your expectations reasonably well. It takes a while to implement ISO, between 3 months minimum to implement. You then need 3 months of evidence, but we recommend normally about a year to implement ISO. You then enter a 3-year cycle, so you get your audit done. You then get an audit next year, an audit the next year, and then you have to recertify. So it's a 3-year cycle, and it will take you 3 to 4 years to get good at it as well. So, like I say, it's not a small undertaking, and we do when we are talking to potential customers about ISO, we go to great pains to warn them. This is not a small thing. This is not something you can do in a few minutes over the next few days. This is a big deal. But yeah, there are definitely benefits to it.
And are there any proportional stepping stones between ISO that companies can think about?
Yeah, I suppose there is one. In the UK, there's something called Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus. It's focused on security. It's focused on cyber security, which is obviously a big aspect of information security if you're a cloud-based business and stuff. So it's a good prep for that. If you then do Cyber Essentials Plus, you'll have experience with an external auditor as well, because that is audited by a third party. That's all about how you manage your devices, how you keep secure passwords and stuff like that. It's a much smaller area of ISO. ISO will touch on a broader array of things, but this is a much smaller one. So it's a good stepping stone. Also, it will force you to do things like device management and stuff like that will help you in ISO anyway. So there'll be a couple of things that you make. There'll be a couple of changes that you make as a result of Cyber Essentials that will help you on ISO 27001 anyway. But that's certainly the case in the UK. Looking at something like Cyber Essentials as a stepping stone and a way to that maturity. Yeah, I would say that's probably the stepping stone certification, so to speak. But just to be clear, it is not an official stepping stone. It's not like a path on the way. It is a completely unaffiliated one, purely focused on cybersecurity. And just to be really pedantic about this, cybersecurity is interested in cyber. Information security is information. So if it's in your head, if it's on paper, if it's on your desk in your office, if it's online, it doesn't matter. It's all about that information. So that's the difference between the two. And that's why ISO is much broader, because ISO is concerned about whether your office door is propped open or not.
Right.
Cyber Essentials is concerned whether you've got a firewall or not. So that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. Right, I have one question that was submitted before, but Stefan, Julie, Emmanuel, do any of you guys have any questions for Tom or Alexa?
Feel free to come off mute, and there's also a chat function if you're not comfortable doing so. Just in the bottom right corner, where you can drop a message. Which one people ever think? Should we start with that question?
Yeah, it was around, do we actually need a DPO? Which I've been asked about a year and a half at Trustkeys, so might be good to answer.
Go on, Mitch, what's your answer?
No. Most of the time it's no.
Yeah, if you're public sector, the answer is always yes. If you're not public sector, the answer is sometimes yes. Basically, the criteria is pretty vague, but you have to be profiling a large amount of people, or dealing with like highly sensitive information, so lots of like criminal record data or special category data. If you meet that, then yes, you do need DPO. If you don't meet that, it's voluntary. The next question that's often asked is, what is a large amount of data, or what does a large amount of special category data mean? No one knows. It's not been defined. There is no number. I can't give you a number. It's not 10,000. It's not 1 million. No one knows. It's a judgment call. There's been a couple of court cases in Europe and stuff where, but every country will then have its own difference. I think, like in Hungary, it's like 10,000. In Estonia, it's 100,000. No one really knows. So it's a judgment call. DPO is quite a good idea, though, on the subject of due diligence, because saying we have a DPO is a good step of, and being able to demonstrate that DPO that's compliant with the law is a pretty good step to be like, okay, we're taking this seriously, particularly if we've done this voluntarily, which you can do, can appoint the DPO voluntarily. So there's a potential benefit for it, but my classic disclaimer for this, as you will know, Mitch, if you appoint a DPO voluntarily, just because it's voluntarily doesn't mean all the law doesn't apply. So all of the rules about that DPO having to be independent and having certain duties and responsibilities, they will apply with full legal weight, even though it's voluntary. So don't just appoint one voluntarily that then can't comply with the rules around being a DPO, because you've just made a rod for your own back there, and you've got yourself into trouble by doing that.
Nice. All right, cool. So we don't have any questions. That's all of the questions answered. So I think we can wrap up at that point. Yeah, Alexa, thank you very much for jumping on and sharing your insight. Good luck with the 8 outstanding questionnaires that you've got.
Thank you.
I'd be curious, Alexa, any closing remarks? Like what's your one top tip?
Invest the time on the right things. So don't try to do stuff you can't handle. Outsource that, but really dedicate. What we don't have as founders or whatever CEO people is time. I don't have time. Can figure out money maybe, but I really don't have time. So figure out which part of this process really need your time, really need you to like stop everything and be like, I need to fucking understand this. And which parts don't. Like I offload 90% of my stuff to trust Keith, and I know that they'll do it, and it's great. But there's that 10% that I need to own, and I need to own well, and that's the part that's worth my time. So figure out that balance for you, and you will go 10 times as fast as you think you can, because people that are doing the work for you that you don't need to be involved with. So I would say that's worth it. And look, we do sort of like tons of money just from mega enterprises. So it is possible without certifications. We don't even have cyber essentials. It's possible, but you have to really do it well. So figure it out. And also happy to chat to anyone if you want to connect or whatever, talk about this is good. But yeah, that would be my thing. Don't put it off, but don't try to do everything yourself. It's not worth it.
Tom, what about you?
Yep. Ooh. Try and have a conversation with the other person. There's a human on the other end of it. Try and have a chat. This is a partnership. Don't forget it's a partnership. I think sometimes it can come across as there's this really big, powerful company, and that's the little guy, and we've just got to listen to whatever they say. Often they're not approaching it like that. They're trying to find out what you've got in place. So actually having a conversation with them, treating it as a partnership, it can be successful. It's not always, and often it's not. I'm not going to pretend. There are some that would just be like, no, just answer my damn questionnaire. I'm not interested. But there are certain things where, and we see this a lot, where we've got customers that will ask us, how do I respond to this? And we will say, why don't you ask them what they're looking for? Like what kind of things are they expecting? Because we can help kind of work together on some of these things. So yeah, if you can try and have a conversation with the other person, you can't always, but it's, I wouldn't say it's my top tip, but it's my most forgotten thing that people do. Like it's a kind of bonus tip, like top tip, Alexa, I think has got it right. Bonus tip, if you can have a conversation, give it a go. You never know where that might lead you.
I actually completely agree with this, because most of the time, sorry, I don't want to like spend it, but it's like that's been the game changer for us, is people get just understanding that people get these questionnaires and they don't know you, they don't know your business, they don't know sometimes what other people in the business want to use it for. They just get your questionnaire, and then they're judging you based on zero context or understanding of what you're actually doing. So when we have those conversations, I always say, I'll give you a demo. I'll give you a demo of what you're trying to do. It's going to take 5 minutes. And you will see that there is no risk if by this 5-minute demo, and it changes, and then they don't compare me to a mega company. They're like, oh, okay. When you said HR intelligence platform, that's actually what you mean. Okay. And it that's how we do a lot of good stuff with them as well. So yes, I see your tip and I raise you. It's like really important, but it also makes people feel more empathetic towards you.
Yeah.
Yeah, they may not seem like it, but people who specialize in data protection and security are humans too. So
I don't know about that. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Yeah, nice. So I think come to the time. Thank you very much, both Tom and Alexa, and thanks guys for attending.